What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Draft Season Never Ends, the Aftermath NFL Draft Podcast. My name is Chris McGlynn, host of the show. Thank you so much for tuning into this. If you are watching right now, you're probably not used to my surroundings. I'm not really used to my surroundings. I finally built an office, so I've repainted the walls in here, and I have a desk now. I'm sitting. I have a chair, which is fun. I'm not standing and using a bookshelf. I don't have a ceiling fan right behind my head. There's a smoke detector up there, but anyway, I digress. So if you're listening on the audio only version of this, if you're on Spotify, whatever it might be, probably very confused right now, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my surroundings. And a little callback here for anybody who happened to watch when I was in college. My roommate Eric and I had a weekly NFL live stream we did, and I actually just pulled this out. I went and visited my parents last week. I was able to find the old school NFL standings, which I have updated. The standings board that was so pivotal to everything we did on that show. So really fun. I'm excited to get back into this. And yeah, it's been a while since I've done an episode. I've had a lot going on, but I want to try and get back into podcasting a little bit. Hopefully, this is going to start to become a more regular thing again, especially as we get closer to the end of the NFL season. We're in college bowl season, and I mean, there's so much to look ahead to. NFL draft is a few months away, but draft season, the real heart of draft season, is coming up right now. We're getting players declaring right now. We're getting a lot of people putting on their best performances in bowl games, trying to boost their draft stock. We're seeing Senior Bowl roster invites be finalized. There's a lot going on right now, so still plenty more to go. I'm excited to see how this ultimately turns out, but there's a lot going on right now, and I have to say I'm really overall excited about it. I really can't wait for all of it to get into full swing. But we're coming off a rough Thursday night football game for the New York Jets. It's Friday, December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas, so Merry Christmas to all of those who celebrate. And one of the big things I want to talk about is probably a conversation that's being had in a lot of front offices right now and a lot of scouting departments across the NFL, which is, if we're in a position where we have a top 5 pick and there's 2 guys on the board, which one of them do we go with? And those 2 guys would be Will Anderson Jr., the edge rusher from Alabama, and Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from Georgia. And both are phenomenal players. I actually just put scouting reports out about each of them this past week. If you want to go check those out, they're on aftermathsports.com. But they're really fantastic players, both of them. And I don't know that you can go wrong, but one of them has to be at the top of the draft board. And so I think there's a really interesting debate there to be had, because Anderson has all the production in the world, and he was absolutely phenom last year. He's followed it up with maybe not quite the same season, but still been really impressive. And to be completely honest with you, I thought he should have won the Heisman a year ago. I thought it was kind of surprising that he wasn't even a finalist for that award. I really thought he deserved that with the season he had. And you look at Carter, where he just is so athletic. There were people talking about last year. Think about what that Georgia defense was a year ago. People were calling him the most talented player on the 2022, national championship, 2021 season Georgia defense. That defense produced a ton of draft picks, including a bunch of first-rounders like Travon Walker, the number 1 overall pick, Quay Walker, you're talking about Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis. I mean, the list goes on and on. Lewis Seen got in the back of the first round as well. I mean, tons and tons of talent coming out of Georgia last year from that defense, and Jalen Carter might be better than all of them. It's a real possibility, honestly. He's a violent pass rusher. He manages to collapse the pocket well. Tons of mobility going back and forth. Really like that first step. Good burst. Pretty solid against the run as well. He's a 3-down player. There's been some reports of character concerns. Now, I don't know anything about that, right? I mean, I'm just doing this based on the tape that I've been watching. I'm not in any of those conversations. I have no idea what the guy is like in the locker room or anything like that. So maybe there is some truth in that. That usually where there's smoke, there's fire, but there's a ton of stuff that comes out during draft season that ends up not being true. So I'm going to take everything with a bit of a grain of salt and just know that it's out there, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's always true. It's a tricky situation to be in. So the biggest thing here is you look at these 2 players and you say, okay, one's an edge rusher, which typically you would say is a more valuable position in the NFL, right? The NFL tends to put a big premium on edge rushers, pass rushers in particular, guys that can get after the quarterback off the edge, can play in that defensive end or outside linebacker spot and create some pass rush pressure. Now, the difference is that Carter could do that on the interior, and there's a ton of value in that as well because, as we've seen, anybody who's talked about Tom Brady will tell you he does not like having pressure come up the middle at him. He does not do well with it, and that's exactly the type of player that Carter could end up being. The comp that I'll give to him, I've seen some people say, oh, he's Aaron Donald. I don't know that I want to go that far just because Aaron Donald might be the best interior lineman of all time, but I'm willing to put him up there with a guy like maybe Quinnen Williams, who just earned his first Pro Bowl nod playing for the New York Jets, or even like a Chris Jones playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, who's been one of the best, most underrated interior pass rushers in the league for the last few years. I know that he gets a lot of pub, but I feel like people don't realize just quite how good Chris Jones has been. That's the type of impact we're talking about with Carter here. Now, the production is not really there. He's only had 6 sacks across his past 2 seasons. He was a bit of a part-time player. He didn't really get in as much when you're playing behind Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis. You can understand why that might be, but he wasn't on the field for every single snap. This year, he was on the field. So 2021, kind of a rotational player. 2022, on the field almost every snap, getting out there, and showed that he's more than capable of handling. He's got great stamina. He's able to make the plays out there. And so you can understand why there's a little bit of a dilemma here for who you go with. It's tricky to try and figure out. Now, if you're going to just go purely based on the grades, I have Carter as the higher rated player here. He's the highest rated player I have on my board so far. I gave him a 95 grade out of 100 here. And he just really does. He checks all the boxes. He's 6'3", 300 pounds. He can move really well. I think he can play nose tackle in the NFL, but obviously his best position is going to be in a 4-3 scheme or a 3-4 scheme where he's allowed to play kind of as that either one tech where he's lining up between the guard and the center, or as maybe a 3 tech where he's lining up between the guard and the tackle. And you get a chance to just let him go to work and collapse pockets and knife into the backfield and all of that. I mean, it's really phenomenal to watch the impact that he can have on a team. Now, with Anderson, I have him graded a little bit lower. He's a 92.5. Still really, really high grade on him. Highest rated edge rusher I have to this point, and probably will be. I'm going to keep going down. I got a lot more to do. I'm just started getting into the process of grading all of these guys out, but I can't imagine anybody's going to touch Anderson's grade. For example, Tyree Wilson, who you see mocked in a lot of top 10, top 15, in a lot of mock drafts at this point from Texas Tech, I have him at 89. So we're talking about a difference of 3.5 points right there in favor of Anderson. So just trying to give you an idea for where Anderson stands. I mean, we're talking about him in the same category as Chase Young and Nick Bosa and a lot of the top edge rushers, pass rushers that come out of the draft in recent years. I don't know that he's going to be quite as instant impact of a player, but he's been productive, and that tends to carry over to the NFL. Production usually wins out, especially when it comes to defensive players like that. When you got a guy who's racking up, 20-something sacks over the course of a 2-year period, and that typically is going to translate. He's got all the athleticism you want to see from an exterior player, lining up there outside the tackle and trying to get home. He can bend well. He can turn the corner. He's pretty solid against the run. He sets the edge well again in the running game. There's a lot that he does well. He's very smart, very instinctive, and he's well coached. He's coming out of Alabama. He gets one of the best defensive coaches of all time in Nick Saban. So there's really not a whole lot to nitpick in Anderson's game. There are a few things here or there where you start to wonder a little bit. The motor was down a little bit this year. Maybe he just knew that, hey, I've already kind of made it. You know what I mean? He's already kind of done everything he needed to do. He's shown everybody what he's capable of. But if you go back and watch the 2021 tape and compare to the 2022 tape, those are two almost completely different players. 2021 Will Anderson was just flying 100 miles an hour around the field. 2022 Will Anderson was really good still. Won the Defensive Player of the Year of the Bronco Nagurski Award in college football. That's how good he was. But you could tell it just wasn't the same kind of locked in, I'm going to go out there and blow up every single play type of mentality that he had the year before. And I can respect that, right? I mean, you're trying to protect yourself. You're trying to make sure that you don't jeopardize yourself here, come up with an injury that costs you, millions upon millions of dollars. Will Anderson's going to be a top 5 pick. That's going to be a very lucrative contract that he ends up signing when he gets drafted. So I can kind of respect that. But I do wonder a little bit about that. Like, is that going to be something that starts to plague him a little bit in the next level? I don't think so, but there definitely were moments where you looked this year and it just didn't feel quite like the same player. I'm assuming that's because he knew he was in a draft eligible year and he'd kind of done everything he needed to solidify his draft stock, but there is always that little bit of a concern there. Overall, though, both are fantastic players, and I think it really comes down to what your team need is and what your scheme fit is here. And there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. I think Anderson fits best as a 4-3 defensive end, maybe lining up as a 5 tech right outside that tackle. You can split him out wider, go 7, 9, put him out there wherever you want him to and let him just rush the passer. He's good enough against the run as well. He's a little bit light. I think around 245 pounds to really be playing in that spot. But I think he can probably add another 5-10 pounds and you get him up to about 250, 255. You could also play him an outside linebacker as well. I just like him being able to get his hand on the ground and let him just go to work. I don't want you to have to think about, okay, do I want to drop him into coverage here? Because he's athletic enough to be okay in coverage, but that's not his strong suit. It just feels like a waste to do that with such a talented player like him. Now, you can play him out there and just let him rush, let him go to work, let him play, standing up and just let him go to work out there as well. And Alabama moved him all over the formation. You can play him on the interior as well at times. I mean, they used him as a 3-4 end at times, which is, a 3 tech. And that was a bit of a surprise. It's not really his strong suit, but he still manages to do it because he's so much faster than interior linemen that he oftentimes gets the jump on them. So I think it depends on what your scheme fit is here. I love him as a 4-3 end. You play him on that outside there and just let him go to work. You can use him as a 3-4 outside linebacker, but that has to be a scheme where you're sending your linebackers on every play. It can't be one where it's like, oh, well, we're going to have him drop into coverage 25, 30, 40% of the time. That's not going to be how you use Will Anderson effectively at the next level. So there's that aspect of it. For Davis, I keep saying Davis. Carter. Davis was the guy that came out the year before that everybody loved. Carter, for him, I already talked about it a little bit, right? I think he can play nose tackle, but I really love him in that 4-man front, playing as a 1 tech, letting him kind of line up between the guard and the center, or you can even play him in a 3-4, kind of like what Aaron Donald does now. Aaron Donald, everybody talks about him being a defensive tackle. He doesn't even really play defensive tackle anymore. He plays defensive end, right? You let him go, and he let him play as a 3 tech and just dominate, kind of between that tackle and guard, and man, he just wreak havoc. So I think it comes down to what you're looking for at this point. Do you want to try and prioritize getting somebody who's going to be able to create interior pressure and, run the risk a little bit of a player who didn't have as much collegiate production, but we saw get home quite a bit in terms of he would disrupt plays, he would get in passing lanes with his hands, knock balls down, forced a ton of fumbles, all that type of stuff. Carter managed to do all of that. He didn't always necessarily get home, but he hit the quarterback a lot. He collapsed the pocket a lot. He forced the guy off his spot a lot. There's a lot of that stuff that you see on his film where he's collapsing the pocket and he's making an impact, even if he's not necessarily recording a sack. Now, Anderson is a sack artist. If you want somebody who's going to make sure you're taking down the quarterback, guy that could be in that 10 to 15 sack a year type range, if not even higher than that, I mean, that's what we're talking about Will Anderson here. He might not get home as consistently as Carter does. Like Carter, the interior defensive linemen, you usually don't see them win on pass rushing snaps quite as frequently. However, we're talking about Carter. I think he would win pretty consistently, but we're talking about a guy where it's just a difference of where you want the pass rush to come from. It's really what it comes down to. So, like I said, I have Carter as the higher ranked player. I have Anderson, I think, is the more premium position. It's a really tough choice. I have Carter as the number 1 player on my board. I have Anderson at number 2. So you can understand why we're splitting hairs here between 2 fantastic players. If I'm forced to choose, I think I might go with Carter. And the reason being is that I think the impact that he can have on a defense when you get that interior pass rush is just so phenomenal. I mean, you can scheme up ways to get guys in one-on-ones on the outside and stuff like that. And this is actually something that Andy Reid had said that I really thought was interesting. But you can chip guys on the outside. You can use a tight end. You can use a back. You can do all that type of stuff. It's really hard to give help on interior pass rushers. Sure, you can try and double team, but that means that somebody somewhere else along a 4-man front is going to have a one-on-one. So let's say like the Detroit Lions, because they're looking at like they're going to have a top 5 pick thanks to the Rams trade that they have with Matthew Stafford. They're likely going to have a top 5 pick. If Jalen Carter is there and you say, okay, we're going to put Jalen Carter and Aiden Hutchinson out here, one of those guys is going to get a one-on-one, or you're going to have to keep a tight end or a back in to chip or help on Hutchinson while also devoting a double team to Jalen Carter. That's a ton to think about for any defense there. So in that case, yeah, I think I would probably go with Jalen Carter. I think he would be a fantastic fit there, and it just changes so much of what a defense has to do, and an offense, has to do and think about when it comes to game planning for that. On the flip side, if you're a team like Chicago, where you don't really have a whole lot to work with right now, I might just go with Will Anderson, because that dude can just fly off the edge, let him make plays, and I think he would just be an instant impact player on that defense. Honestly, I don't think either one's a bad choice. Maybe you do a little more digging into that character issue thing with Jalen Carter and turns up something, and Will Anderson ends up being the top guy on your board. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad choice for either one. Houston Texans, who are the number one pick, wouldn't be a terrible thing for them to go with one of these two players, really. I mean, both are going to be instant impact players. The defense is aging and overall not very good to begin with. So, yes, they need a quarterback, but do you love Bryce Young? He's a little bit undersized. C.J. Stroud has struggled a little bit down the stretch. Will Levis feels a bit like a project. Anthony Richardson definitely is a project. I mean, they both really... There's not a slam dunk quarterback in this class. It's not Joe Burrow, right, who's coming off a fantastic season and looks great. I think Young will be a franchise quarterback. This is a conversation for another episode. My point being is there's a little bit of uncertainty at the top of the draft when it comes to quarterbacks still. And maybe Young will separate himself, kind of through this pre-draft process and really solidify that, hey, I'm the number one guy. If you need a quarterback, you're thinking about it like the Texans are, right? They got Davis Mills, they got Kyle Allen. Doesn't really sound like a great quarterback situation. You just take Bryce Young and say, hey, we got our guy. Let's go build around him now. They have a second first-round pick to help him out as well. Maybe they go out and get a Quentin Johnston, or you get out an impact defender, right? That can maybe a Miles Murphy still there, Tyree Wilson, somebody like that to come and help reshape some of your defense. So Houston's got a lot of options on the table. But I think you look at this and say, yeah, probably go with quarterback, but you have to think about it with just how good these two defenders are. So I wanted to get into it a little bit because it's a conversation that I've seen everywhere of how do you split between these two, because they really are fantastic players. Like I said, I think I lean towards Carter being the top guy here. Anderson, obviously a much more proven player when it comes to production, but I just think Carter is a special athlete. I think Anderson is going to be a very effective pass rusher at the next level, and could end up being. I think both have all pro potential. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. I just think Carter's ceiling might be a little bit higher, and his overall impact with that interior pass rush and his ability to get home there is going to end up being the difference. I think that just means it's so valuable to get a player who's able to collapse the pocket like that, because it changes everything an offense has to think about. So that's my 2 cents on it. I wanted to weigh in a little bit. It's been something that I've been kicking around for a while, trying to figure out what I would do there, because there's a lot to think about in that draft decision. I'm really happy that I'm not an NFL GM trying to make that decision this year, because it's a tough one for sure. So that's going to just about do it. We're in the midst of bowl season. I'm sure I'll have plenty more to talk about in the coming weeks. We're heading towards the college football playoff. We're about a week out, a week and a day from the semifinal, and we got a bunch of the New Year's Six bowl games coming up, of course, right around that time as well. As you can tell, I'll be watching December 29th. Syracuse playing against Minnesota. Excited for that one. Not a ton of... There's a couple draft prospects in that one. Mo Ibrahim from Minnesota, Sean Tucker, Garrett Williams. I can't forget John Schmitz-Mitchell as well from Minnesota, probably the top center in this draft. So there's some good talent there. I'll be watching from a fan perspective, and then probably watching it again at some point from a scout perspective. So thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. If it's the first time finding the podcast, welcome. This is the Draft Season Never Ends. You can find it pretty much everywhere that you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Anchor. I don't know. I'm running out of podcasting platforms at this point. Pretty much anywhere that you find your podcast, we should be there. If not, let me know. Happy to try and work on it and see what I can figure out. And of course, you can check out aftermathsports.com. That's where I do all my writing. I'll have the podcast posted there as well. And you can follow on social media, Twitter, Aftermath Sports, same with Facebook as well. Give us a like, a follow, all that good stuff. Always appreciate that, and love hearing from people, talking about different things as we get into draft season, because, man, there's going to be a lot of NFL fan bases in the next 2-3 weeks that all of a sudden are going, okay, we thought we may have a shot at the playoffs, but now it's time to turn our attention to that NFL draft. So make sure you keep it here. I'm going to hopefully have a new episode out next week, but it's the holidays, so you never know what's going to happen. But I'm going to try and get back to doing this a little more consistently. I know it's been a struggle recently, so happy to be back, though, and I appreciate everybody who's tuned in and supporting me on this. It's been a ton of fun. So make sure you subscribe, share, all that great stuff. Really appreciate it, and you guys will hear from me again soon.